I think it's about time for another variety show. It is nice and cool here in the shop, even in the dead of summer. It was getting really hot, so I decided to follow through with the project I've been thinking about ever since I moved into this new shop. This shop came with two giant garage doors, 10 foot by 10 foot each. And as it started getting hot this summer, I could feel the heat radiating off of them as far as 6 feet away from them. It's just making the whole shop really warm. I got some sheets of EPS foam. It's basically just styrofoam, and it's foil faced. It has foil on one side. So I glued that into each section of the garage door. They're 2 foot by 3 foot sections. I had to get 6 8 foot by 4 foot sheets. And it was just an afternoon's job with a hot knife and some construction adhesive. After that was done, I decided to upgrade my cooling in the shop with a combination dehumidifier and AC unit I got. Time will tell as to whether or not that'll be able to keep up. It's making a difference. It's still getting a little bit warm during the afternoons, which I suspect will just be kind of the situation I'll have to deal with. It'll definitely be interesting to see how well the shop retains heat this winter. It really wasn't bad last winter. Now, I've been constantly fiddling with the CNC mill since you last saw. I upgraded the computer that controls the mill. I had a laptop running it in the last video, and that was a very cheap laptop I just happened to have around, and it ran Windows. Mach 3 is a Windows-based software, so it's easier to have a Windows-based machine. The machine I originally wanted to run it with is a tower computer that's a little bit older, but actually a little bit more powerful. This computer was actually one that I had configured with it and had tested out the motors with, and then the power supply in that computer failed, so that's why I switched to the laptop. I've replaced the power supply in that tower, and I've upgraded the whole setup to use it, and I can have a monitor that's hanging up next to the machine as well as have a proper keyboard and mouse setup, which is a lot easier to use than the laptop's keyboard. So along with upgrading the computer to the tower, I also moved the little desk that everything was on to a smaller stand I got. Thanks, Mom. And I've got everything a lot more neatly nestled in there, and I've got a lot more room around the machine. So I've moved the E-stop from the side of the box up to a 3D printed box I made, and it's connected with just some 1/8 inch audio cable and connectors. Those are kind of hard to find, surprisingly. A funny side note is that the 5-volt power I have going into the controller box for the CNC machine actually has a pretty large amp draw. I originally wired up the controller. I had wired it just with a USB wire. You can see that in the video. And I had it originally plugged into just a USB plug from the desktop machine, the tower. Apparently, the draw is so much that it actually fried the power supply in that, and I never realized what the cause was until I had then plugged in the laptop and tried to run it, and when I had 5 volts, the 5-volt power plugged into the laptop, it would, I presume using the battery as a buffer, but during the startup process it would never get past the BIOS screen, and it would just sit there and cycle until I unplugged that 5-volt dedicated power. Then it ran just fine. So the moral of the story is I was running it off of just a wall, like a power adapter, like a charger for a phone or something. But I've since wired in a 5-volt power supply from across the pond, but this is a little bit more dedicated, and I can have it wired into the main power alongside all the rest of the power supplies in that controller box. So it's a little bit more of an elegant solution, and I have all of the power supplies, the entire controller box, running on one power switch, which finally showed up from Amazon after a month and a half. Another little issue I've since solved with the milling machine since getting it up and running is the drivers for the stepper motors. Now, something I sort of touched on in the other video was that the drivers for the stepper motors can control how many steps the motor takes to complete one revolution. You can also control how much amperage is regulated by the drivers, and these motors are 3.5 amp motors, so that was easy. It's just you set it for 3.5 amps on the drivers. The thing is, I was having a lot of weird problems that were really difficult to articulate. I wasn't getting a lot of consistency and repeatability, and I was having other issues with backlash and just general motor performance issues. I guess you could categorize it all. It was just the motors were acting funny and I couldn't figure out why. And having no experience with this prior to this project made it a little bit more difficult to pinpoint what my issue was. After letting it drive me nuts for a solid month, this is my official first real complaint about the kit I got for these stepper motors, drivers, and breakout boards. All that stuff I talked about where you could set the steps per revolution and set the amperage, that's all controlled on each driver by a set of dip switches. It's just a row of on-off switches, and certain combinations give you certain outputs. The dip switches were upside down. Next to the right side up writing underneath all of the dip switches is a very small arrow that's next to the word on, and it's pointing down. So on is down, which is, I'm sorry, that's not how I'm used to doing it. So all of my dip switches were set completely wrong. So with the motors getting the proper amount of juice and a actual known amount of steps per revolution that I can then coordinate with Mach 3, now they're performing fantastically. They're a lot more rigid, a lot more smooth and accurate, and it was funny, any backlash I was having is gone because they actually they have the power to move the screw back and forth at the first pulse. I know some of you have noticed in the past, I do have a website. It's practicalrenaissance.com, and I haven't had much content on there for a while. I've gotten it mostly set up now, and I'm starting to get content fleshed out on it, so go check it out. You can see a number of videos categorized by content. I'm starting to work on blog posts and descriptions of each video to give a little bit more of a written, in-depth narrative for each one. You can also find links to my Etsy shop where you can buy stickers, as well as links to all my other social media.
Anyway, thank you for coming along for the ride on this variety show. I've got a bunch of projects in the future that I'm working on right now I'm really excited about, so if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. You'll be notified when my next video airs. Also, for as little as $1 a month on Patreon, you can have access to early release videos, Patreon exclusive videos, as well as a sticker sent by me. Anyway, thanks for watching.